Well, hello, family. This is Kevin Binion, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 2 of Under the Influence. And again, I'm your host, Kevin Binion, and welcome to the Nice Podcast. And I am here excited about what we're going to talk about today. Of course, you know we're going to be talking about leadership from various perspectives, and I am so glad to be able to be with you, coming into your homes, your living rooms, your dining rooms, your cars, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Even your bedrooms, if that's where you got to look at it, you know, I'm right there with you. But, you know, I want to just thank you guys for joining us tonight and being here. And we got a great show planned for you. And I am excited about our guest. He was our guest last week. I brought him back this week because I felt like we had some unfinished business. And so we're going to talk about leadership again with our special guest, Mr. Marcell Copeland. And he is here in our audience right now. And Marcell, how are you tonight? And we're glad. Thank you for being here. And welcome to Under the Influence. And we're glad you're here. If you want to give a shout out to anybody, why don't you go ahead and say hello? And, you know, just welcome yourself to the group. How's everything going?
Things are going well. Thank you for having me here on this show again. You know, it's an honor to be here and to talk about leadership. Yeah, I'm just excited, you know, to see what you throw at me today.
All right. Well, last week, we'll say the last week was a dry run. This week, we're not holding anything back. We got the technical issues out of the way. We got the bugs out, so we can just have at it tonight. So you might want to duck a little bit because I'm going to throw it at you and see what you got. But, you know, it's important that we really talk about leadership. And again, Marcell is an up-and-coming leader in our community. He is a program officer with Junior Achievement of Southeastern Michigan, has done a great deal of good in the community that he serves in the metropolitan Detroit area. And so we're very glad of his, you know, to have him here. And we're very proud of his work and his accomplishments. But he's also a very smart young man. He's very diligent. He's a student. And, you know, even though he's done with his college career studies right now, he still studies and he still reads and he keeps his ear to the ground and he knows what's going on. I rely upon him a lot to get information. And he is a young leader. He represents the millennial generation, but he represents them in a very positive way. And so we're very happy to have him with us again tonight. So Marcell, let's get right into it and let's talk about leadership. So looking at the climate of today's, society, America, the United States, the way things are going right now, what would you say the climate of leadership is in our country right now? Would you define it as good, strong, weak? What do you see in leadership in America right now?
Overall, from my perspective, I kind of see leadership as being kind of weak. Things are just kind of like status quo. I don't see a lot of strong leadership emerging. You kind of see people being put in positions, but they're not doing a lot of leading in these positions, and so things don't really change when they get inside positions. So I would say things are kind of weak right now, especially because a lot of these new emerging mindsets and leadership are, a lot of it is just self-centered and counter the current culture, and so really a lot of people don't know how to adapt to that, and so right now, I think that leadership is going through kind of a shift and it's kind of being redefined what leadership looks like for a lot of people.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. So you don't think that leadership is really strong right now? What do you attribute to that?
Well, I take a look at, how many things really change. And so when you take a look at, let's say, politics, a lot of these politicians get into office and a whole lot don't change. Even with corporate structures, you see people get appointed to high positions and corporate structures, corporate leaderships, and companies do oftentimes even a lot worse than they did before, in their product planning and their ability to reach their customers. And so I don't really see like a really standout leader these days.
So we know, Marcell, that and I teach this when I do my leadership training classes, that there are four ways that people get into leadership positions. One, they inherit it. So somebody is in a position, they leave the company, they move out, and so they inherit it. The second way is that they lobby for it, and this is where the politics come in. So they want it, they want the power, they want the money, and so they lobby for it. They play the political games and they lobby until they get that position. The third way is that they actually apply for it, and there's an opening and they apply for it. They interview, they're a good candidate, and then they get the position. And then the fourth way is that they earn it. And this is where individuals have been, they put their dues in, they put their time in, they work for a company, and they're recognized for the achievement and accomplishment, and they are promoted into that leadership position. Those are the four ways. But the problem is, Marcell, that people typically who actually earn that leadership position, they don't get it. It seems like they're bypassed or they're looked over, not given the opportunity. And then somebody who is less qualified ends up getting those positions. Why do you think that is in corporate America?
A lot of times I see those who get promoted who are less qualified. A lot of times they're just easy to play the game, so to speak. And so a lot of times managers will, in upper level leadership, will appoint people who they know will be kind of like that yes person, that person that won't go against the grain, that person that also won't expose too many of their own flaws. And so those people who apply for leadership positions, who are go-getters, who are ready to take charge and do things new, a lot of times they get bypassed and looked over. And then sometimes it's just overall what we think leadership should look like. If you don't fit our mold of what leadership should look like, then we're going to skip over you. And so unfortunately, we don't look at things from a objective matter of what had this person done, what can they bring to the table, but more so, okay, this doesn't fit my style or my brand of what I think leadership is.
Those are very interesting points. So talk to me a little bit about fit. What does it mean to have a fit? Why are people not the right fit? What causes that? And I agree with you on that point. And that's something that I talk about a lot when I talk to leaders and I talk with managers. You have to be a right fit for the organization. But why do people choose leaders that are not the best fit for the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. You said it. Every organization has a culture, and and the organization has a personality, if you will, that usually takes the personality of the head of the person who's in charge. And so a lot of times, individual comes into a leadership position and they are kind of counter what that culture is of that organization. And so if you have an organization where everything is very lax, but yet they expect you to get your job done, and they're not micromanaging you, then someone who's very, your A type that comes in, then, that can disrupt things. And so if that's your type of leadership style, then they'll skip over you because of that. So also it works the other way. if you're a little bit too lax, or if you don't have effective communication skills or team building skills, then if you're in an organization where that is like the cornerstone of how that organization runs, then you're not going to fit in. And so it just all kind of depends on the kind of personality of the person and their leadership style, and if it would fit into growing that company.
Let's talk about Black people in leadership right now, Marcell. Now, we know that we've had some challenges in the African-American community with leadership, the consistency of leadership, with leaders not really remembering, a lot of them remembering where they came from, and really doing or using their resources and using their influence to really benefit the Black community. Why do you think that we have such voids in the Black community, specifically regarding leadership?
A lot of it is we've as a people, we've kind of we're in place, but we're out of place. I put it like that. So what I mean by that is we have Black people who are now being put in positions to be CEOs of major corporations, own sports teams, and then climbed political sphere. However, there's no one that's really in place to bring others back up from out of these neighborhoods that which they came from. And so a lot of times you see Black people elevated, but they're not really reaching back. And then really, when you look at leadership in Black communities, you don't really see a whole lot of mentorship going on, like strong mentorship. You might see small mentorship organizations, but no one really invests in the time and effort to get our people to where they should be to take leadership positions. And so it's normally very surface level, maybe some sort of soft skills, maybe, providing them with suit jackets and coats, but not grooming them to take position of leadership.
So would you think that and that's a very important point that you make. Do you think that that's because our people who are currently in positions, in our culture, is it because they're just selfish? Is it because they're insecure? Or is it because they just really don't know how to groom people for, that level? Why do you think that is?
I think it's a little bit of all those things. I think that for some people, they just use their ambition, they get to where they want to be at, and they're not really thinking about, where they came from. That's just for a long distant memory. And then you have others who, they want to be very kind and charitable. And so they do things that will, look good and make them feel good, but ultimately don't prepare people for long-term success. So I think it's just a little bit of all of those things.
How much does the love of money? We know that money is a tremendous influencer. How much does the love of money? What role does that play in not preparing the next leader or the next generational leaders? Where does money fall into that?
Yeah, when it comes to money, sometimes we could kind of develop that crab in a barrel kind of mindset. I don't want you to get what I get. I don't want you to get to my level. And so I think money plays a big part in it, because if I see a young up and comer and they have a greater determination, they have better ideas, they have a better presentation, a package, so to speak, then that can really mess up my money, if you have a non-growth mindset. And so if you have a very limited mindset, then you're going to want to try to suppress those people as much as possible so that you can maintain where you are.
But don't we realize that, as a Black culture, realizing that, we have been playing catch up for decades and centuries, why don't we realize how detrimental that is to us as a race moving forward, in society? Why don't we recognize that?
I think it's because we kind of adapted this survival mindset that's kind of been passed down from generation, that we kind of feel like I have to grind constantly. I have to always take my position in life. I always have to work that much harder to get to where I need to be at. Whereas you look at a lot of other cultures where they would kind of pull together, and even if they don't like each other, they'll pull together and make sure that they're kind of uplifted. Whereas I think we kind of fall into this idea that there's not enough for everybody. And once you fall into that mindset, it just sets you up for failure.
Let's talk about Black excellence for a minute. Part of being a great leader is being excellent in what you do. Why aren't more Blacks in leadership? Why do they have this attitude that, I don't have to be excellent. All I have to do is just exist? Where are we lacking in that whole spectrum of being excellent as an African-American leader?
I think a lot of it comes from background, where we come from. If you come from a background where, the expectation of you has always been the bare minimum, then that's what you're going to put out, is the bare minimum. And so we see that sometimes in our public school systems. You'll see two different schools where there's a household, families that place a very high expectation to exceed, to achieve, and to exceed in every subject, and to the best of their ability. And then you have, another group where they might come from a set of households where, that is not the norm, and whatever you bring home is what you bring home. And, there's no real drive to be your best. And so these people grow up to be adults who feel like, I don't need to be my best. What does it, matter for me to excel above other people? And so it really just comes from how you've been conditioned to think.
All right. With that, so let me put you on the spot here with that statement. I'm a person of influence. You're a person of influence. I've got the money. You need the exposure. I'm offering you right now $5 million. I'm going to give you the exposure. I'm going to offer you $5 million. All you've got to do is abandon your agenda, abandon your platform, and support my platform. What are you going to do?
So that would ultimately depend on what your platform is. Does your platform align with who I am and align with my platform?
It's completely different, because my platform is going to eventually put more money in my pocket. You've got more of a social consciousness platform. I'm not particularly concerned about that. I'm concerned about lining my pockets, but I know that you're the person that'll give me the influence. You'll give me the enroll. You'll get me the votes. You'll help me become that popular person. You'll get my voice out there because you're going to represent my agenda, knowing that we have differences. I'm offering you $5 million. What are you going to do? And what do you think most Black people would do in that case?
I think most Black people, and any person in general, would see the dollar amount and then just jump on it and take it. Myself, I would like to say that I would just want to take that back, evaluate it, because I could be ultimately set myself up for failure in the long term, supporting someone who may or may not, get me in trouble and themselves in trouble by doing something foolish, even though they paid me off, $5 million. And so I have to take inventory of, who this person really is, and is it going to benefit me overall? But if it benefits me, I believe I will take it.
You're going to take the $5 million. So it's not going to be an immediate no. You're going to actually give it some consideration and some thought before you make a
consideration. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, what if it causes you to compromise with your character, your integrity, your beliefs? What if that happens?
Well, for me personally, that's what I kind of built my personal brand off of, if you will. And so if I lose that and I compromise that, then I already lost. And so I'm already at a deficit. So I can't work with anyone that's going to cause me to compromise, because my personal brand is that someone that the community can trust.
So have we lost Black excellence in our society, and have we lost great Black leaders because they have compromised and they've taken the money and pretty much forgotten about their social responsibility to their race?
I think so. I think, you see it a lot of times in politics where, you get the nice politician that shows up in a community and neighborhood. They join every neighborhood association or organization they possibly can, and then, they get these positions of power, and then they just forget about people. And so you have a lot of people with title, but not a lot of people who are making progression. And so you look in our communities and people look around them, they say, Well, yes, we're ascending to these top political platforms. We're ascending to, these top positions. But if you look in our neighborhoods, we still have disproportionate incarceration. We still have, high rates of illiteracy. We're a lot of times in last place in public school education. And so we still have all these issues. And so I think people feel betrayed by that.
Okay. Let's talk about Ketanji for a minute. She was confirmed by the Senate and the House. She is now the first Black female justice, on the Supreme Court, the highest level of constitutional oversight in the United States. What do you think about her confirmation? And do you think that she's going to do a good job in that role?
I think, given what I've heard about her record and just her kind of conduct leading up into her confirmation, I think she will do well in the role. Her confirmation itself was very interesting because, I understand that it's designed to grill a person, but it seemed like there was times where they want to disparage her. And so I think this country kind of took a look at that and kind of seeing what African Americans have to go through, and then African American women will have to go through. But overall, I think she'll do very well in her role, her position. She's well prepared for it, has all the experience, and so I don't think that anything will stop her from excelling in her role.
Let's talk about women in leadership for a minute there, and using Ketanji as a platform to get to springboard into this conversation. She has a tremendous responsibility to uphold constitutional integrity. Are women in leadership right now, and they are in different categories. We know Mary Barra, who is the president and CEO of General Motors, has been in that role for a couple of years. We see a lot of women assuming some really great and influential positions in leadership. And we know that they have had to work a long time to get the consideration to get in those positions. They have had to labor. They put up with a lot. Minorities and women have had to deal with a lot of injustices, unfairness, biases to get where they are. But specifically women, do you think that women are more qualified than men to be in leadership positions in our society today?
I think overall, yes, they are. For the last decade or so, they've done a lot of studies on women and male and female dynamics in the workplace, and women typically score ahead in all categories. If you look at the studies from Forbes, you look at the Harvard reviews, any of those educational documents and those surveys that they've done, even the Pew surveys, women have always kind of came ahead. And even on an educational and preparedness level, they oftentimes are more educated. And so I think they are more qualified, especially given the climate that we're in. They score well in team building. They score higher in communication. They score higher in self-development oftentimes. And so those are all the keys that you kind of need. And then also they more than men are usually champions for change. And so, most companies now, they have more of a social conscious to them. And so women are kind of leading that charge too. And so I think they are better qualified in many cases.
So 40 years ago, positions that women currently hold in leadership were occupied by men, as corporate America was a male-dominated society. And corporate America is still today, for the most part, male-dominated. But if women continue to maneuver themselves into leadership positions at this pace, what's going to happen to men leadership, and how is that going to affect the dynamics of our society if we have more women in leadership positions replacing men?
I think that if more women ascend to become leaders in companies, that really not a lot is going to happen to the guys. The men have a way of creating new things to be in charge of, to be the head of. And so I never seen a data point that said that, when a company had a woman to take over, that company somehow failed, or that the men inside the company became stagnant. And so I think that we have more female leadership overall in politics, and organizations and ministries and all kind of things, that what you would kind of see is more elevated opportunities for others, because women leaders are really good at taking others who you traditionally wouldn't catapult to leadership, and finding what really works for them, and then putting them in the right places. And so I think overall it'll be to a benefit.
So with that statement being made, and let's go back to the Black community, although the statement is not necessarily Black or white, because we'll see these demographics in many ethnic communities. But we're growing up in a society right now where we have a lot of single parent homes, and there are women who are leading those homes and leading those children. And many of these women do not believe that they need a man to provide any kind of leadership assistance in their home. Seeing that women are now gaining more influence, more authority, more power, and they're moving into these positions, does that threaten the structure of the home? And if so, what happens to young men that are being raised in these homes where all they're seeing are females in leadership?
Well, that's an interesting thing. Working with young people, you can kind of see that there is kind of a shift where the girls are more, not to use the term aggressive, but they're a little bit more determined to take on leadership roles. They're a little bit more determined to progress in life, where now you kind of see the boys, they're kind of just hanging back. Everything's kind of lax, and there's kind of expect to be taken care of in some respects by the girls. And so I think that it can change the structure of the family, because we know that both parents are essential to the development of a child. Now, if both parents are not in the household, that's not like an indictment or anything like that. But it is important for the overall well-roundedness of a child. But you can see in many instances that the male becomes a little bit less dominant, a little bit less aggressive, a little bit less masculine, even in some cases, by seeing the women take charge. And so it's kind of like this. It's kind of like this expectation that the women are going to kind of take charge and do things for them.
So again, going back to my earlier question that led into that discussion, if we have a society with weak men in leadership, do we have a healthy society?
No, because it's a balance. You can't just have a society full of weak men. Because men play a vital role in leadership, and so they bring certain things to the table that I can't say that women can't, but men are kind of like they're your traditional providers, right? And society. And so I don't think that men will again all become effeminate, or become homemakers, or take on female roles. However, I think that you're going to see more of a balance. It's going to be a little bit more common to see men who stay home and raise children than you would typically today.
Let's talk about leadership in our educational system right now. You have worked a great deal with educators in our educational system. As a matter of fact, last week, you were working with one of our Detroit public schools to provide some support through junior achievement. And that's a great thing. And we need more of that. Based on your observations, are the educational leaders in our school system, and it doesn't have to be inner city, but in our school system in general, are the educational leaders preparing our children to be successful?
Yes, I will say they are. You know, what they don't oftentimes report on when they talk about, the failures of our school system is that our school system has a lot of a lot of support. They have a lot of resources that's coming in to prepare young people. And so when you see these students, you see them going through mentorship program, you see them going through leadership programs, you see them going through enrichment programs. And so they're doing the best that they can within their power to prepare these students to be productive leaders in society. And so I would say yes.
So where's the breakdown then when we don't see more of our children succeeding in a leadership capacity in the marketplace? Where's the breakdown? If you say that our school systems are doing a good job to prepare them for these leadership opportunities, then why aren't we seeing more success? Why aren't we reading more statistics about our children doing better in leadership capacities in the marketplace?
You know, it's a few reasons. There's a lot of systemic reasons why certain groups of people don't succeed well in the marketplace. You also have this whole thing where some of our young people are just kind of disconnected when they get job opportunities, looking at what is acceptable in a job, what is not. And so it doesn't always connect, even though they get this training, this teaching. And so, they're constantly being reminded. And so one of the biggest complaints that we hear is, on our end is that, they need better soft skills. They don't really know all the time what's appropriate etiquette and what's not. And so it's just a constant reminder. But from the school standpoint, they teach them how to function within a system. And so a lot of their stuff may be a little bit antiquated, but once they get into the real world, they need something to kind of anchor them and make all the information connect. And so I think that's where the disconnect is you can get some information for 5 or 6 hours a day, but once you leave out of the building, then you need something else to kind of make it all come home for you.
So what makes it come home? Because you just made a glaring statement. Once you leave out of the building, you need something to help it connect. So what is it outside of the building that we need to make it connect for our children?
I think they need opportunities in job shadowing. I think they need opportunities to be around leaders of all levels. I think they need opportunities for real mentorship outside of the buildings because again, you can give someone academic information, but you need to also provide an opportunity to apply it, and then have that reinforced at home and in the community.
Let's talk about you for a minute, Marcell. You are the anomaly in a situation like this, and I've known you for quite some time. I've known you since you were in college. And I've watched you grow and mature as an individual. But your home wasn't the Cliff Huxtable type home. But you've done quite well. Why are you different?
You know what? I would say that a lot of people outside of my household kind of gravitated towards me. And it took me really by the hand and kind of like led me. They gave me opportunities of growth. And so in college, I met people who brought in my horizon, who was willing to take a gamble on me, no matter how rough around the edges I was. And so, and from there, going back into my home community, there's people who was willing to integrate me into the community and show me, all the good things that were going on and then how I could be a part of it. Now, if I would never been exposed to any of those things and none of those opportunities, then my life could have been a lot different. Okay.
So you're a product of your village, is what you're saying to me. You had some semblance of a village around you, and that helped to shape you as a man, helped you to build character, gave you some motivation to do better. But what about the children that don't have that? What hope do they have?
For them, it's very bleak, but that's why we as leaders should be trying our best to reach out to them, and not everybody can do everything, but we all can play a part in reaching out to the younger generation and helping them get to the point where they need to be. A lot of it is just exposure. I'll never forget that, I was a part of a summer program many years ago, and they took the kids outside their neighborhood. And it was only a few miles outside the neighborhood. They didn't even go to, like outside the state or anything. They just went to a nicer part of the community. And the kids was on, it was on, they were like, where are we? Did we leave the state? No. No, these was young children, of course, but their perception was that abandoned houses, blight, abandonment, decay, that's all that there were. And that once they went outside of that, it was like, oh, really? Lakeshore Drive? Oh, really? This is out here? And they didn't have any clue. And so I think we as leadership focus on changing the perceptions first and the expectations of our young people.
How do we hold leadership accountable for changing the perceptions? How do we hold them accountable for making more of an investment, in our children? How do we hold them accountable for providing that level of exposure that's going to let our children know that the environment that they live in is not the only type of environment that exists? How do we hold leaders accountable for creating that shift and making those changes so that our children begin to have a better outlook on their own lives?
I think you should start from wherever they are in their leadership journey, and then put pressure on them and say, look, you came from this community, you came from this background. Now you owe it to this community that, you rise up these young people here. You can't go around saying that you're this and you're that and you're leading in your community is not being invested in. So I think it's just really having a real upfront conversation with these leaders, whatever industry they're in, and saying, okay, now you've made it. Now what can you do to make things better? And then follow up with it,
Let's talk about the educational curriculum. You are, let's say, for example, that you are a college professor. How would you change current educational curriculum to focus more on preparation for leadership? What would you change? What would you do differently? What courses would you eliminate? What courses would you add as an educator to focus more on preparing our young people to be in leadership positions?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would have a course called "It's Not About You," and so let them know that there's a big, huge world out there, and so focus on worldview, and then some of the social problems that are affecting different groups, and then let them then transition to courses on empathy and how to serve your community and be empathetic towards the community, and then how to offer solutions to your community that will work for them, not just for your own gain. And so I think those are the first two places I would start. I would start then after that talking about growth mindset and not being stagnant, because sometimes we tend to just get out of a rut. I made it here to this position, and now this is all that I am. This is who I am. I built this thing, and so I'm not progressing any further. And so our communities stagnate. And so having that growth mindset, and then looking at, entrepreneurial mindset, not being an entrepreneur, but an entrepreneurial mindset. And so how do you constantly innovate? How do you constantly look at the raw materials, the raw opportunities around you? And then how do you turn that into something that's sustainable for your community, that can solve a problem potentially, or be something that is that can really empower your community?
Let's talk about your role as an influencer. You are very influential in your current responsibility with Junior Achievement of Southeastern Michigan. How seriously do you take your role as an influencer, and how do you use your role as an influencer to make an impact in leadership?
I would say through advocacy. I'm constantly advocating for my community. I sit in some places, some positions, and I don't really talk about it, but you'll be surprised how many people don't get the type of community I come from. And so I come from, inner city of Detroit, and not to play up on that, but that's where I come from. And there's a lot of people in positions of power who just don't get it. And so they might even serve those communities, but they don't get it. It's like, well, how come, they're not this, they're not that. You see all these resources flooding in the community, and you have to kind of explain and advocate on the level that you're at to say, what, these children are worth it. This community is worth it. And so that's what I kind of do. I do a lot of advocacy. And then when I encounter any young person that I could spend time with, I do pour in some knowledge to them, and I know that especially with teenagers, it looks like they're not listening. But I was a teenager once, and I'm pretty sure I looked like I wasn't listening to people who was trying to speak to me. So I use that kind of influence to speak to them. But also when I find myself in new places, I'm always advocating for different organizations that I think should be funded, the organizations that I think are doing good work, and always passing that along to others who are in position to help.
So you mentioned they don't get it. And I don't think we need to spell out the they. I think we know who the they is that we're referring to here. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole today. Another broadcast. Why don't they get it?
I think a lot of it is upbringing and culture. I begin to find out that a lot of people are insulated. And so, they might have a community that is very supportive and self-sustaining, and they don't ever really see outside their community because their community has everything that they need. And so they see everything through the filter of their own lens. And so, especially when you get into people who might be like first generation, and they might not understand the hardships that has become prior for our people. And so a lot of times they just don't understand well, how come a school system is failed, or how come, it's perceived that a group of young people, a group of people group are not attaining to a certain level, and they don't always understand that, the same provisions were not always there for that group of people.
So let's use the example of an exchange student. You've been to Japan. And that is a tremendous opportunity, and that is a entirely different culture. Let's say, for example, we took some of them who don't get it, and we did an exchange project, and we brought them into the inner city and had them live with the inner city family for a week. And then we took one of our students to live in one of their communities for a week. What do you think will be the outcome of that experiment?
From what I've observed, from something that happened similarly, but not exact, I would say that those who don't get it would come here, and at first they'll have kind of like a guilt. They'll start shedding tears. They'll act traumatized about what they're experiencing, because it'll be so much different than what they've, encountered. I think for our youth coming from the inner city, going into their community, so to speak, I think it would just open up their horizons, open up their minds to things that they really are not used to. And so I think from that opportunity, there will become growth. But for those who don't get it, I think the first thing that happened to them is trauma. They'll be traumatized, and then there'll be this kind of like obligation that they would feel to be over generous and charitable after that.
So the reason I asked that question, Marcell, is because when we're looking at leadership and we're looking from a global perspective or a real world perspective, we know that the world is not all Black, it's not all white, it's not, all Hispanic, it's not all Indian or Middle Eastern. There are a variety of cultures that make up this world. And those cultures all contribute their part, and they play their role, and they all have value to bring to making our societies what they are. But looking forward, going forward, and I think the very first question I asked you was, what do you think about the landscape of leadership in America right now? If our young people are not getting the proper exposure that gives them that real world perspective, what's going to happen to leadership in our society within the next 5, or 10 years?
I think there'll be, I think leaders will still rise to the top. It may look a little bit different. I think some of the norms would be different, but leadership will still rise to the top. But again, you always have that risk of having like that leadership void, where you have entire groups that should have a leader, a clear defined leader, and they don't. And so that's where it gets kind of dangerous, because you never want to have any group that's not fairly represented. And so there's a chance of that happening. But I think that overall, there's enough programming, there's enough exposure for those who can find it, so that leadership can emerge in this country.
So let's talk about leadership from a historical perspective right now. So let's open the history books up a little bit and talk about this, because I really, and I know that we don't have enough time to really put a solution together right now, but I just want us to think a little bit about leadership historically in the world, from youth to adult. So Adolf Hitler was a child at one point. Genghis Khan was a child at one point. Alexander Putin was a child at one point.
Mm-hmm.
What happened with these individuals that historically, and even present day, have been labeled as dictators and tyrants? What happened that these children grew up and got into positions of leadership and authority and did such damage and chaos to the world, even including the loss of millions and millions of people? What happened? What happened? How do we attribute those chaotic situations to these individuals? Who dropped the ball?
I think everyone kind of around them kind of dropped it, because when you look at individuals like that, they went through some sort of emotional and psychological trauma, and that there was no one there to recognize that and to nurture that thing. Well, not nurture it, but to kind of speak to it, because all these people have tremendous leadership traits, and even though they do horrible things, they've done those horrible things using amazing leadership techniques. And so you take a person like a Hitler, who was very pronounced, who was able to kind of turn the tide of an entire country and an entire people group. You don't do that just by not having leadership skills, but ultimately there's a village around him that dropped the ball, that failed to realize that there was something wrong going on with him emotionally and mentally. And I think it's the same thing with the others. When the era sign started going off, then no one recognized them.
So parents are a part of that village.
Mm-hmm.
Do parents have a responsibility to recognize those leadership traits in their children and begin to start guiding them in that way? Do parents have the primary responsibility to that? I know we talked a lot about education, but where do parents fall? What role do they play in preparing children for leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that parents are the first example for their children. And so, you can send your child, to church, you could send them to schools, you could send them anywhere, but really your example comes from your household. And so I think that parents have the responsibility to kind of grow their child, nurture it as they raise it, see those traits, see those things that they're interested in, and guide them along in life. That's really the role of a parent. So if you drop the ball there, then you have this high probability that, that child can be lost, when they reach adulthood.
What about parents that don't have the capacity to do that, though? Because many parents in many households they don't have that leadership capacity because they themselves were not mentored. They themselves, nobody invested in them. They are not, particularly educated because many parents in many communities, they have been in survival mode and they've done what they thought was best at that time to just do the necessities. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we look at the very bottom tier, of that pyramid, which is, just the physical needs, food, clothing, shelter, blah, 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 blah. And some parents, they don't progress up the pyramid to get to self-actualization. What about those parents that are stuck at that lower level tier in the pyramid that can't see a need to do anything more for their children than just provide them with food, clothing, and shelter? What can we do with those children that have leadership ability, but it's not being recognized nor cultivated?
Yeah, that's where the idea of a broader village comes in, that community as a village. Even if the parent drops the ball or don't have the capacity to find the leadership traits in their child or recognize it, there should still be someone in the community, whether that's a teacher, principal, the person who live across the street, the person inside of a ministry, a person inside the local business that can say, you know what, I recognize something in this person. I'm not willing to let them fail. I think that's where that whole, it takes a village phrase comes from.
Let's talk about the role that social media plays in leadership today. And we know the social media plays a huge role in everything. Mm-hmm. I was very disturbed when I read, I think it was yesterday, that a 10-year-old girl committed suicide by what she read on social media regarding her. I can't remember if it was body shaming or if it was some other type of bullying, but she was just 10 years old and committed suicide. So that's just one effect that social media has played. And in that respect, it has played a huge role. There are many, many people who have taken their lives because of what was posted about them on social media. But from a leadership perspective, how has social media influenced leadership positively and negatively, in your opinion?
Yeah, so leadership, as far as social media, it provides a huge platform. And so it takes anybody literally with the ability to take a phone or a laptop, anything that can connect with the internet with a camera, and give them a voice. And so you see people now who are experts and subjects just based off of how many followers they can get. And really it's all about community building. And so with social media, if you can build a community, then you're a leader. And so it gets dangerous because now you have so many different voices you can follow. And these voices are not always the best people. And so you see these instances where young people are committing suicide, because they're following these different advices, or they might be shamed by someone who has influence, and, something may go viral and they feel like all eyes is on them and they can't escape it. And so that's the dark side of it. And so I think it shaped leadership by, one, empowering people, both good and bad. It's empowering. As long as you can create that community, you can create followers. But also on the other side of it is, it kind of gives people the false impression that anybody can become a leader of anything just merely by having an opinion. And I don't think that's really true leadership.
So, and of course we know that, most social media platforms, they are money makers for the people who own them. So should there be some accountability there to have them take more of a watchdog role to ensure that people who are utilizing these platforms are not being unfairly treated, are not being singled out, are not being biased or shamed? Should the owners of these social media platforms, should they be more accountable, in that regard, so that we make sure that the message that is getting to the followers is a message that is really motivating them and not discouraging them?
I think there definitely should be safeguards in place. The problem is in a place, especially like the United States, where we're so used to having certain freedoms and freedom of speech that it's hard to do. You look at social sites like YouTube and Meta, and there are various companies like Instagram and Snap, and even Twitter. When they try to put these things in place, there's these huge backlash of people who are saying, you know what, you're taking away my freedom of speech. I should be able to say and do whatever. And so then you get into this problem of how do I manage and how do I tell, what's offensive and what's not. And so by that, it causes a whole nother set of issues by, running everything through these complex algorithms and people who are set to watch, what people are posting and not. And so you run into these problems of, what truly is acceptable in society and what is not acceptable. But I think overall, every social media company should do their best to make sure that, only appropriate things are being put out there.
Well, Marcell, guess what? Our time is up. That hour went by fast, my friend. Yeah. So thank you very much for being on the show today. Great answers, great response. We had some great dialogue. And I wish you very well in your continued professional career. You have any parting thoughts for the people before we close out?
I just want to thank you for having me here. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we look forward to having you on the show again in the future.
All right. Thank you.
Well, family, we had a great show tonight. Thank you all for joining in. And I want you guys to remember that leadership is very important in our community. It's very important in our society. It's important in education. It's important all over the world. And because we are people who are people of influence, we need to make sure that we use that influence positively for the greater good in our communities. There's so much negative going on. We need to make sure that we use our influence to make people better and not make people worse. So remember that as you're talking to people, as you're communicating, as you're out there doing what you do, doing what you do, doing how you do, just doing you, just make sure that you use your influence to lift people up and not tear them down. I'm Kevin Binion, your host of Public Influence. Join us next week. We have another guest talking about leadership from a unique perspective. And remember, leaders leading from the front. We'll just do it then.